The viewpoints expressed on Night Fright are not necessarily those of the host, the staff, the sponsors, or the affiliate stations. Tonight's program may contain graphic themes or images. Viewer discretion is advised.
There is a time for question. There is a time for answers. There is a time to challenge. There is a time to speculate. There is a time for change. There is a time for truth. The time is now. Welcome to Night Fright, your voice in the dark for harmony and conspiracy. And now your host, Brent Holland.
Showtime! Welcome to the show. I'm Brent Holland, everybody. Welcome to Night Fright. Get the coffee going, get the tea going, get a beverage of your choice going, get in that comfy chair, settle back, kick your feet back up, get the comforter up nice and tight. Got a great show for you tonight, folks. Marshall Klarfeld is here tonight, and we're going to be looking at his new book, which is called Mysteries of the Alien Technology. And Marshall, fans of the show will know Marshall's name for sure. He's an expert on ancient aliens, on the Bible's story of creation and how it ties into the ancient alien theory and things of that nature. I'm really excited to have Marshall on. Marshall, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brett. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Let's talk about Contact in the Desert first. Folks, Contact in the Desert is this wonderful conference coming up in 2015, May 29th to the 31st, 2015, in none other than Joshua Tree. That's near Palm Springs in Southern California. People there are going to be Kathleen Martin, Stanton Friedman, Jim Mars, Stephen Bassett, Shelley Wild. I'm just trying to think of all the great people that are going to be there for you. All the people in the deep end of the pool, as I like to call it. All the heavyweights will be there. You'll be able to meet them and greet them. You'll be able to hear what they have to say. All the cutting edge research. That's Contact in the Desert. The link is on the www.nightfrightshow.com website. It'll take you right there, and you can order your tickets and spend the whole weekend with great guests like Marshall Klarfeld. And Marshall, what is going to be your specific topic when you're at Contact?
I'm going to talk in my lecture, Brent, about the future of mankind, and is it going to be necessary for us to seed the galaxy with our species? It's kind of a looking forward to what our destiny is and what's going to happen to our civilization, because we're kind of at the tipping point right now. There's been many extinctions on our planet. We're a new species, only been around 200,000 years, which is practically nothing in the scheme of things. And we're going to talk about what happened after the flood. The flood was the first major extinction of our species.
That was the first? Can we talk about that then, for sure?
Well, about 11,500 years ago, according to every civilization we've uncovered, there was this humongous tsunami of water that brought all the surface life on the planet Earth to an extinction. Actually, it covered the Earth with probably 11, 12 miles of mud. So anything that did survive would have a tough time eating and feeding itself and surviving. So there had to be some outside help. And that story is revealed in my second book called Gilgamesh 10, which is the 12-tablet epic of Gilgamesh in a screenplay format. And it tells in the 11th tablet how events took place. And we were saved by this extraterrestrial species called the Anunnaki, who were in effect our original creators, and that the evidence is that we wouldn't have made it. Our species, along with most of the surface life forms, would have been gone. And the story in the Bible of Noah and the ark, how they got 2 by 2 on that little piece of wood is kind of ridiculous. But what actually happened, according to the Epic of Gilgamesh, and they were given to us in this story, was that they collected the DNA of the male and the female of all the species, insects and everything, and put it in a golden box and put it on the submersible, which was able to survive the tsunami. And all these details are in our story of Gilgamesh 10. People are free to read that, and it's quite exciting because I think it's the true story.
Marshall, when you talk about studying the Bible, did you study the Torah in its original language, or did you?
No, Brent, I don't read Hebrew, but I did read the 5 books of Moses, the Torah.
Right.
And I was fascinated by what I thought was a skip code in there, and I investigated that. And I was told by almost all the sources that I researched that it's the only document that was copied perfectly. Every time it was transmitted from one generation to the next, if they made a mistake, they tore it up and started over again.
Yeah.
So that really started my search years ago to, is there extra life in the universe? Are we alone? Is there a God? These are the questions that really bothered me most of my life. And finally, I discovered Zecharia Sitchin in 1999, and immediately struck up a friendship with him and had a 10-year teaching relation. He taught me for 10 years all the things that I asked him and what he knew. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us, Brent. I've kind of taken up the torch, and I'm a disciple. I defend what he wrote, and I've embellished on it. I've discovered some new stuff I wish I could have shared with him, but unfortunately I have to just get it out there on my own and hope that it expands the proof that the Earth was colonized 400,000 years ago by an extraterrestrial species that called themselves the Anunnaki. And this comes from the Sumerian database, which is cuneiform tablets and cylinder seals. It's a very robust database of information. From that, which I gleaned the story that the Anunnaki came here in search of gold, that their primary objective was to preserve the atmosphere of their planet called Nibiru, which is the 12th planet in our solar system, and that they had really done most of the things that we're doing, and they destroyed their ozone and caused a leak, and they couldn't close it. And since their planet traverses in a huge elliptical orbit, it's like 3,600 years around our sun, and when they're way off, outside in the Oort belt, it's the only thing that protects their life is their atmosphere. They're like a spaceship, and if they were losing their atmosphere, they were going to lose their civilization. So they found the one thing that would work, which was to take powdered gold and flake it up into the atmosphere, and it sealed the ozone leak. But they didn't have any gold, and they discovered that planet Earth had the gold, so they came here 400,000 years ago and started mining our gold.
Were we present 400,000 years ago in some form? Not at all.
No. Our planet is 4.5 billion years old, young, really. It's one of the youngest stars in our Milky Way galaxy. But our species doesn't appear until only 200,000 years ago in Southeast Africa. That's where they discovered the first skeletal remains of Homo sapien. Now, the species before us, Brent, was called Homo erectus. And Homo erectus was a creature, kind of looked like us, but they had 1/3 the brain size, and they didn't have any vocal cords. They couldn't talk. And they evolved for 1,800,000 years out of Africa, covered the entire land surface of the planet Earth. But the most advanced that they were able to achieve through evolution in tool making were wooden spears and stone tools. Now, it's 1,800,000 years of evolution producing only Stone Age tools. Now, we appear 200,000 years ago in Southeast Africa, first Homo sapiens. And in less than 250,000 years, we're walking on the moon, which means we had to develop tools at a very rapid pace, which is impossible in evolution, never has happened before. So the question is, where do we come from? How did we get here? And why are we at the top of the food chain right now?
Yeah, the creation aspect, it's been exponential.
I entered Caltech in 1947, which was a very significant year in that the summer of 1947, we had the Roswell crash incident. And this was, campus talk was all about UFOs and extraterrestrial life.
What was your perspective when that took place? I mean, here you are at one of the most prestigious universities in the world, head deep into science, cutting edge science.
Yes.
And all of a sudden this occurrence happens. What was the scuttlebutt?
It was
going on?
the scuttlebutt was, was this possible? Why aren't we being told more about these folks if they came and visited us and so forth? So I was blessed. I have 3 great teachers in my lifetime, Brent, and 2 of them were at Caltech. My physics professor was Richard Feynman. He was the Einstein of my generation, and Linus Pauling, another brilliant Nobel laureate. And as a 19-year-old undergraduate, I was fortunate somehow to have cornered Feynman on a one-on-one conversation. And I asked him, I said, Dr. Feynman, do you believe in UFOs? I wanted the word from the smartest guy I know. And I'll tell you what he said. He said, Klarfeld, I believe in the law of probability. Of the hundreds of billions of stars in the Milky Way galaxy, and of over 400 billion galaxies in the universe, the law of probability states there are 10,000 solar systems just like ours, and we're the youngest. If any of the others survived their space age, they could have visited us. I said, wow, what an answer.
What an answer. What an incredible answer. Marshall's more questions about how we got to be human. Do you think the aliens took their DNA, as we've seen in the past in movies? It's been portrayed, and Prometheus has a pretty good example of that, where their DNA is mixed with the creatures that are living here, and all of a sudden out comes Homo sapiens? Is that primary? Okay.
Yes, I believe that.
Are they still visiting us?
They could still be here. I think they phased off the planet maybe 1,000 years ago, but they're nearby, and I need to explore that more. It's a question that's very difficult to prove.
It's okay, buddy. Take your time. We're speaking with Marshall Klarfeld tonight, folks. His book is called, one of his books, he's got 4, Mysteries of Alien Technology. As always, folks, with every guest that comes on this show, www.nightfrightshow.com. Just click on the guest book cover and all the links that are associated with this show, and it will take you right to a place where you can order the book. Marshall's website will be there. He has also got videos for sale. His website I was on today, and it's a wealth of information. It goes into far more detail than the time will allot us for tonight. The idea tonight is to give you an overview of Marshall's great work and his research, and for you to continue and carry the torch forward, as Marshall said yourself. Let's go back to Marshall now. Marshall, the technology that was used back then, have we obtained that technology ourselves in order to manipulate DNA? I'll tell you why. I had Dr. Francis Collins on, and he led the team that broke the genome. And he said something startling to me I wasn't expecting. I said to him, how different is a person's DNA from the next person? I was thinking of the different colors of people, et cetera, and he startled me. He said 99.9999999 to infinity% of our DNA is the same.
That's right. That's right. We all share the same DNA because we were genetically engineered, Brent. In other words, the story that came from Sitchin's translation of the cuneiform tablets is that they took the egg of the Homo erectus female, scooped the nucleus out, put their DNA in, and planted it in one of their birth mothers. And what they produced was a bicameral species, and they called it Adamu, and it really was the first Homo sapien. And Homo sapiens were like if you crossed a horse with a donkey, you get a mule. Okay, now mules are sterile. So what we're kind of using that as a similarity. And the next thing that they did was they had to make Eve fertile so that we could reproduce ourselves. And in the Bible, there's an interesting story called Adam's rib, and that the woman came from Adam's rib. But actually, what that was a four-way operation, as described by Sitchin's translations, where they took the marrow from Adam's rib and somehow manipulated it in Eve's DNA and enabled her to become fertile. Because without that, they were birthing all the Homo sapiens, and the women were getting a little tired of doing that, so they said, let's make them procreate themselves. And it fits. What's amazing to me is that Sitchin was able to take the Bible stories and the cuneiform database and weave it together and make sense.
Now, the Genesis story is one that I've always been attracted to. Now, in the Hebrew language, there are different words with different meanings, I guess you could say, for God. One is Hashem, another one is Adonai.
The Hebrew language is complex, but it's nothing as complex as Sumerian. The Sumerian language, which I believe was the language spoken by the Anunnaki, according to Sitchin, each word has 5 different meanings. And in order to translate that, that's where the difficulty is, because you have to get the context of what's going on and know. And for a long time, everybody spoke Sumerian, because if they were birth mothers were Anunnaki and they were speaking to the kids, to the babies, they spoke in Sumerian. And that language is no longer used anymore. In fact, it's so different, they can't tie it to any of the languages on the planet Earth. But Carl Sagan chose in his golden record that he put on Voyager 1 and 2, 50 languages saying, hi, here we are, we're friendly, and all that. The first language he put on there was Sumerian. And I often wondered why he chose that. And I can only surmise, Brent, that he knew that the folks that had put it all together, that was their home language.
Wow. I didn't know that. I'm getting educated tonight, folks. Marshall Klarfeld's our guest, and we're talking about the possibilities of ancient aliens, the Anunnaki, of course, and how the Bible is a record of that, a written record of that. Now, we find a lot of parallels. You'd mentioned Noah's, the flood, for example, in the Sumerian texts, as well as the Bible. Are there other examples that we could look at from the Genesis or even Exodus?
In fact, besides the Epic of Gilgamesh, there's a 7-tablet book called Enuma Elish, which is the creation story in 7 tablets. And the 7 tablets, as deciphered by Sitchin, parallels Genesis. It's absolutely the story in a very poetic and double meaning structure. But Enuma Elish, and I published that in my first book called Adam the Missing Link. That's kind of the primer book that I asked Sitchin. I said, your books are beautiful. I've read them all, but most people aren't going to wade their way through what you've beautifully put together. And to get the message, I would like to make a Life magazine format, like lots of pictures. And he said, sure, as long as you use my stuff, you say, with permission by Zachariah Sitchin. I said, absolutely. So the first book, Adam the Missing Link, I take the majority of the 12th Planet, which was his first book, all the stories that are in there, and I put it in over 50 color pictures and explain it so that people can get the context of how Genesis and Enuma Elish and the Epic of Gilgamesh were the original text, the original database from which the Bible came. You realize that these writings are thousands of years before the Bible was written. And I think that's like scholars went around to different libraries. The kings in Mesopotamia had libraries of cuneiform, the perfect stuff. And we've discovered those libraries. And I think that what happened was the original scholars went around and they studied, later on they all went to Alexandria, to that library, to read everything there was. But before that, 1,000 years before the Bible, these stories had to have a meaning. And they got translated into the Bible, and that's, I think, where the Hebrew Bible came from.
Is there a single God in your world? Is there the God of the Bible?
They had a God. In other words, this is what's interesting. The Anunnaki had a deity called the creator of all, because they ran into the same question that I asked Pauling. The second conversation I had, this is published in my first book, Adam the Missing Link, if you want to see how it happened and what the answers were. I asked Linus Pauling, Dr. Pauling, do you believe in God? He said, Klarfeld, our discipline is to explain everything back to the beginning, the Big Bang. He says, if you were to ask me what there was a millisecond before the Big Bang, we don't know. You want to believe in a God, please do. I said, wow, that's beautiful, because I think now the Anunnaki didn't know what there was before the Big Bang. They didn't know who created them, where they came from. So their deity, according to the texts that have been translated by many people besides Sitchin, the creator of all kept reminding the Anunnaki of their destiny. And to them, the most important thing was you didn't mess around with destiny. You know, that was it. And for instance, in the story of the flood, after the flood, there's a confrontation between the two brothers, because one of the brothers, Enlil, wanted all the humans gone. And he made all the other leaders swear that they wouldn't tell anybody that the flood was coming. And all of a sudden they arrive at Mount Ararat, and there's this family of Noah and his kids and his wife and survivors. And Enlil's upset. He says, you broke your oath. He says, no. He says, I got a message from the creator of all saying it was our destiny to come to planet Earth to create humans. And it's the humans' destiny to take over and take care of the planet. Therefore, we have to help them. And at that point, Enlil does a 180-degree turn. He says, if that's the destiny, we got to help these people. And that's how we survived the flood. We got help. They have a mothership, which was their base in circling planet Earth. They brought down trees. They brought down domesticated wheat. They brought down sheep and animals. And, you know, they just started the whole thing over and helped those humans that were still surviving to procreate. That's why they gave Noah, or Ziziru, as he was in the Gilgamesh, long life. He needed long life to have a lot of kids.
Lucky dog. That's all I can say. Going back to the original stories, did they give us ego, or is that something that was kind of, that seems to be a big stickler?
We have their DNA. And lots of time people ask me, he says, you know, what do they look like? And I said, well, I'll tell you one thing, we look like them. They don't look like us. Because we are their offspring. We are gods in ruin, really. That's what humans are. We haven't, you know, they gave us technology. Now, here's an interesting subject that you maybe should share with your audience. Without outside transfer of technology, we'd still be living in the Stone Age. In other words, there's no reason like the Homo erectus evolved for 1,800,000 years, but they only got to stone tools and wooden spears. There was no reason to build high-rise buildings and highways and houses and stuff, because that's not part of the evolutionary process. So you had to have an outside input. And what is written in the cuneiform text, the Sumerians said everything we have was given to us by the Anunnaki. So you got to look at the birthplace of civilization is in the Mesopotamia. It's a Sumerian civilization. Apparently, 6,000 years ago, out of the caves came these Stone Age people, and they had writing, they had wheel, they had music, they had philosophy, literature. I mean, all the first that you need for a civilization, and they say that was given to them. And that's how they built their high-rise buildings, and they built their cities, and they started civilization. Without the outside transfer, this isn't going to happen. And I discovered a beautiful film clip, a documentary on the internet. It was called First Encounter, and it shows in 1976 a French team coaching a lost tribe out of the New Guinea jungles. These folks have been living for thousands and thousands of years without any outside technology transfer. And this 45-minute film clip. I recommend it to your audience to see because it shows what happens when they meet and when they give them advanced tools to help them become more civilized, but more advanced. It's interesting, you know. And Sitch and I had a big discussion about that. He says, you know, Marshall, he says, we really shouldn't be civilized. There's no reason why we're civilized. We had to have technology given to us to become civilized. And that's in the database.
One of the things I found fascinating on your website when I was watching your great documentary was the fact that you've come up with a pretty original concept in terms of why there's pyramidal shapes all around the world. And I'd like you to tell us your thesis on that, because I think there's something to it, my friend.
Well, thank you, Brent. I call it my washboard gold mining theory. Back in the 49 gold rush time, the way they were collecting gold out of the riverbeds was they had what they called a sluice box, which had a washboard in it, and they'd take the mud with the gold in it, and they'd run it with water through the sluice box. And gold is 19 times heavier than water. And when it bumped into these ridges, it would drop into the slots, and the rest of the stuff would go back. And that's called washboard separation. And it dawned on me that the pyramids in Central and South America are all step pyramids, and they look like washboards. And also I went to I found a picture of Machu Picchu from way back. And it's a bunch of terraces. All it is just terraces. And I said, you know, there's a river goes around that peak. It's called the Urubamba River. And when the spring runoff comes, it's filled with placer gold, which means that nature is stripping gold from the veins, putting it in a form of placer in the water. And all you have to do is collect it and separate it out. So I said, bingo. I think that they pump the water at Machu Picchu, for instance, up to the top and let it come down over these terraces, and it collected on the terraces. And in my last book, Mysteries of Alien Technology, I put together the final piece of evidence of how they collected it after it got on the flat surfaces. And I came across an ancient myth called Jason and the Golden Fleece. And there was a statue in Sochi, Russia, of a gal called Medea holding up a sheepskin filled with gold. And the light bulb went off. I said, bingo, they were putting the sheepskin in the water, and because it has lanolin on the fibers, the plastic gold was collecting, they dry it out, bingo, they had gold. Well, if the Anunnaki were doing this on all the monumental structures like Chichen Itza and Planeke and all these step pyramids, which, by the way, I discovered were next to Plaza River water. Every one of them has got a source of Plaza River. They must have had sheepskin on the surfaces, so when the water trickled over, it collected, and all they do is pick it up. So I said, where in the hell did they gonna get millions of sheep? And then I read Michael Tillinger's book in Southeast Africa. He's discovered these stone circles. There's millions of stone circles. And I remembered in Sitchin's translation of Enki, which was one of the leaders, the first guy who came here, he was the master of the sheepfold. S-H-E-E-P-F-O-L-D-S. So I went to Google, I put in sheepfolds, and it comes out it's a stone circular structure for raising sheep. I said, okay, what about the magic vibrating stones that Michael's talked about? He says he's found these resonating. I said, that's great. Today, when we build a sheep pen, we electrify the outside fence so the predators can't get in.
That's right.
And if these stones resonated at a frequency that would keep the predators out, they had a built-in protection system. So I put 1, 2, and 3 together, and I said, this fits with my washboard gold mining theory. And I think that it's yet to be proven. But when the flood came, Brent, all of the deep mines that they were digging in Southeast Africa were flooded out. And Enki, who was smart, their scientific guy, he said, you know, why are we wasting our time smelting and rock digging and all that? Let's just take it out of the water. And then I discovered the most interesting connection to that was the interior of the Great Pyramid. Everybody and his brothers tried to figure out what all those chambers in the Grand Gallery and the tunnels in the King's Chamber were all about. First of all, I discovered they're all watertight. I said, my God, why would they build inside the Great Pyramid this fantastic series of compartments and make it watertight? I said, let's see what it is. Before there was electricity, there was a thing called a hydraulic pulse pump, which means if you shot water down into a chamber and you banged it resonant, it would pump higher than you brought it in. This is kind of complex, but in my book, both my books, The Anunnaki Were Here and The Mysteries of Alien Technology, I have many pictures showing how this works. They built a moat around the Great Pyramid, filled it with water, Nile River. Now, every spring, the Nile River washes the Nubian gold mines out and brings placer water down the Nile. Let it come in up to the entrance of the Great Pyramid. It's 36 feet above. It comes down this 26-degree passageway, hits the pit, bounces and goes up and starts surging up into the Grand Gallery, and then eventually gets up into the King's Chamber. The Grand Gallery is an upside-down washboard. It's a cobalt ceiling. So as the water was pulsing against it, it was knocking the gold down into the slots. And the smoking gun, this is something nobody's ever thought about before. There's a box, they call it a sarcophagus, in the King's Chamber. Perfect in the inside. The machining is just absolutely, but all the edges, the outside edges are all banged up. Now, Archimedes says anything that's hollow will float. So as the water got into the King's Chamber, it floated this box and it banged around against the ceiling and the walls, and it chipped all the edges out until it chipped one corner and the water went in. That was the end of that operation. But I said to myself, my God, everybody's tried to figure out. There was a guy named John Chambers who did a big paper on what's called the Pharaoh's pump. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that got me going. The Pharaoh's pump was the hydraulic pulse pump, which before electricity was a technique for getting water to go higher than when you brought it in. And because of the resonant chamber, the sonic boom went up, and above the King's Chamber, all these resonant stone send the sound waves back down and got it up in there. And I have an illustration of that in my books. And I think that theory is brand new and needs to be verified. I think it's a reasonable explanation of what's going on, why they built it inside. Now you say, well, why would you go all the trouble doing that inside? Well, didn't want people to get the gold. So after the flood, this is very clever, and they started building step pyramids like Chichen Itza, which had a cenote with placer water right next to it. I show a picture how they pumped it up to the top. They told the native population, the gold belongs to us. You can make art and things with it, but when we come back, you got to give it to us. It's ours. And that's consistent through every Inca, Aztec, Olmec, Mayan. All gold belonged to the gods, so you didn't have to worry about them. And then I said, you know, a place like Cusco, there's never any evidence that the Incas mined gold. But Cusco was filled with gold. And just northwest of Cusco, there's 3 zigzag walls. Sacsayhuaman, its name. And everybody thought it was a fortress. Well, I looked at it from up above, and the zigzag is a washboard. And it came down, the water came down, and they collected. And why did they make that watertight? You didn't have to make a fortress watertight walls, but it was made watertight because it was used to collect placer gold separated from water. This all fits together.
The JFK Assassination, the definitive book by Brent, Holland. From inside the Oval Office to Daily Plaza, first-person witness accounts. Order yours right now. nightfrightshow.com.
Marshall Klarfeld, folks, I'm being specifically quiet tonight because I'm learning a bunch, and I hope you are too. www.nightfrightshow. Just go there, click on tonight's guest books. He's got 4 of them, folks, and that'll take you right to a place where you can order the books from the comfort of your own home. And tonight's a great night to do that, and you're going to learn a lot from this gentleman. He's done some impeccable research, and I'm just being blown away. Somebody has just texted me and asked me to ask you about the golden fleece and how that works into things. And I was going to ask you as an extension of that. We know the Ark of the Covenant also was made with gold. Is that all come together?
Well,
Is that
gold,
part of the
gold is a
process?
fantastic mineral. We use it extensively in our space program. It has great refractory properties, conducts electricity, but it reflects the sun, and it's malleable, and you can use it through all of your industries. Besides it being pretty, and it's easy to work with. To answer his question, I believe yes, that the collection material. I often wonder, when I wrote the third book, The Anunnaki Were Here, I said, okay, I got these terraces and I got the gold coming knocked down onto the terraces. How'd they pick it up? I couldn't think about that. And then I ran into Jason and the Golden Fleece. King Midas, of course, was in that Sochi area where this takes place. And apparently there's tons of gold coming out of the Turkey Mountains there, and they float down to the Black Sea. They're still doing it today, by the way. I've discovered that there are people in that part of the world that use sheepskin in the river water to collect gold. Now, I've invented and I'm putting on my webpage a thing called the Golden Fleece Sled, which is a little device that you can take and put it in the river water. It's got a lanyard and a tent pegs to hold it down, so you can leave it sit in the water, and it's a sled with a pelt, sheepskin pelt inside of it, and collect your own gold. And at $1,100 an ounce, doesn't take very much placer gold to make yourself you don't have to go into the mud, you don't have to separate it. It's in the water, and the lanolin on the sheepskin, and you can reuse it. I include in the kit a spray bottle of lanolin. So once you've cleaned it off the first time, you can just brush it and spray the lanolin on, stick it back in the water again, and use it over.
So I just have to interrupt and let people know, folks, if I disappear for 1, 2, 3 months, you'll know what I'm doing.
Are you sure you're telling people about the address of my webpage? It's www.adamthemissinglink.com.
Right, and that will be on our website as well, folks. No worries there, Marshall.
I have everything available on Amazon and Kindle,
Yeah.
and all those places, but the best prices you're going to find are on my webpage, because everybody marks it up. They take my stuff and they mark it up.
Yeah, I hear you, my friend. So that's incredible stuff. Now, the Ark of the Covenant, same deal, right? It's got the gold around the wood, and
Yeah.
and as you said, it's used in space also. My nephew's at Stanford, and he's in aerospace, so I'm just going to brag about him a little bit. He was telling me, Tyler Reed, he was on the show last week with Story Musgrave, and it was a big thrill for me, let me tell you, to have my own nephew. He was saying that gold is also used to...
It protects you from radiation. One of the most dangerous things for our astronauts and the people who go out into space is gamma radiation. And you need protection for that, because it can do us in. It could alter your DNA and you screw up our species. But no, gold has many, many wonderful properties, and it's beautiful to look at, and it won't tarnish, and it shines nicely, and it's pretty. But the fact that the world has now put a price tag on it of over $1,100 an ounce, I think is significant after all this time.
The JFK Assassination, the definitive book by Brent, Holland. From inside the Oval Office to Daily Plaza, first-person witness accounts. Order yours right now. nightfrightshow.com.
Marshall, when you're doing your research, do you find doors opening or closing for you?
Oh no, there's always, like we were taught at Caltech, once you've learned a theory, you know how to go find things. And when you find things, you're going to find answers, and the answers are going to ask more questions. It's like we're still looking at for the particles that make up the universe in the collider. They found the Higgs boson. They thought that was the God particle, but there's more particles. So every time they smash the atoms together, they find more parts of what make us go and what makes the universe go. But the main question, I think, that for millions, say the Anunnaki were a species that are 1 million years older than we are, and their deity was the answer to where they came from, where the universe came from. Nobody can answer that. And I think there are people now who are questioning, are we the only universe? Are there multiple universes? There's all kinds of new stuff. And in my research, I try, I mean, I'm closer to the end of this thing than the beginning. I've been around for a long time. I might not look it, but trust me.
Well, you really don't. You really don't.
Well, thank you. But you never stop questioning how things work. What, you know, as a kid, I always looked at things and I said, you know, how does that work? And I'm still that way. And that's what drives my research, is to find out as much as I can. And I'm really kind of a reporter, Brent. My stuff isn't very voluminous with words. I use mostly pictures. Like in the last book, Mysteries of Alien Technology, I got over 170 color pictures to tell the story. And I think the pictures make more sense to people than a bunch of words that I could put together to try to explain it. But you connect the dots. You start seeing all of these thousands of stone monuments around the world. Now, my latest discovery, this is kind of wild. I looked at the Colosseum in Rome, and I did some research, and I discovered, it was built on a lake bed. Nero had a lake. They drained the lake, and that's where they built the Colosseum. Now, there's no bedrock. Underneath the Colosseum, there's this huge floating foundation. It's 110 feet wide and it's 42 feet deep, made of solid material that floats the Colosseum on top of it. Now, who 2,000 years ago knew about floating foundations? And the upright structures, all the stones are put together in the Colosseum without mortar. They're cut perfectly, fitted together. The arches are fitted together in the columns. But in the interior, there's metal clamps that keep the structure from vibrating. They knew it was an earthquake zone. Floating foundations keep your thing together for 2,000 years during earthquakes. And I think the Japanese 80 years ago started building floating foundations because they live in an earthquake area. So I said to myself, was the architect the Romans? Did they know about this stuff? No, I said they didn't. They were given this beautiful structure, and it was probably Romans helped build it, but the architect, the design of it. And then I said, oh God, what else? I looked at the Pantheon. The Pantheon is a 142-foot dome made out of unreinforced concrete. You know the stresses that are involved in that? I mean, we build domes. We copy these things today. The dome, most of the domes in the capitals are reinforced steel, concrete and steel to hold together. This thing's got no reinforcement. I said, how did they do that? And it's oriented so that the hole at the top, the oculus, lets the sunlight come through. All year long, the circle goes around the dome, and on the winter solstice and the summer solstice, boom, hits the center of the floor. Now, who figured out how to orient that thing on an Earth that's on a tilted axis? It's going around like this, it's going around the sun, so that the winter solstice, summer solstice, I said, that wasn't the Romans. They didn't do that. They didn't build the arch. And then I went to Greece, and I studied the Parthenon. This is the most copied building in the world. You know, the Supreme Court, it's a replica of the Parthenon, built on a plateau above the Acropolis. The Acropolis is an outcrop of rock on which the Parthenon is built. 30 years ago, UNESCO, with $100 million, decided to take the whole thing apart and put it back together the way it originally was built. And they had all their cranes and their things in there. And as I looked at this, and I read it and studied it, there are no straight lines in the Parthenon. They're all curved. The base curves. It's a turtle shell. The front curves, the sides curve, the columns curve. And the reason is that if it was built straight, it would look like it sagged. There's this thing with our eyes, a parallax. You have a bunch of parallel lines. It looks like it bulges. So they made an artificial bulge to make it look straight and perfect. And they found out there were 70,000 pieces in the Parthenon. None of them are identical. They all differ by the fraction of the hair, the thickness of your head. And I said, now here's a general contractor with 70,000 pieces of stone. And he's saying, hey, put that one there. Who? Who 2,000 years ago could have done that? Who had the technology to build something like that? And it all traces back to what I called the vastly superior stone architects. And the monuments that we have here on the planet Earth, thousands of them, made out of stone, perfectly cut, no mortar, everything fits together with friction and gravity, was done by this magnificent species called the Anunnaki. And if you want any further evidence of that, I direct you to a bridge in southern France called the Pont de Garde. Pont de Garde is a aqueduct bridge going across the Pont River, 2,000 years old. All the stones are precisely cut. There's no mortar in it. The arches are cut, the stones are cut. There's millions of stones, each one fitted together and held by friction and gravity. And it's withstood everything that came down that river. Every flood that's wiped out every other bridge, this bridge has stood there for 2,000 years. And the Romans, believe me, did not design and build that bridge. I give credit to the master stone architects, the Anunnaki. That's my story. Is here's the facts, put them together, you make up your own mind. I'm convinced.
Do you think Solomon's Temple and the Dome of the Rock today are built on a foundation made by the Anunnaki?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. In fact, if you go down in the tunnels underneath the Western Wall, you will find 750-ton stones, large cut stones. The only things bigger than that are the Baalbek monoliths. The Baalbek platform in Lebanon has three stones that are 1,200 tons each, 36 feet in the air. That's in my book too. And everybody says, you know, the Romans did this. Give me a break. We couldn't do it. We couldn't mine or quarry a stone, single piece of stone, largest quarried stone on the planet Earth, lift it out of the quarry, drag it up the hill a mile away, and then lift it 36 feet in the air and place it end to end perfectly without any mortar. We don't have the tools to do that, Brent.
Easter Island, the same deal?
These are the mysteries that you need to examine. You need your folks to do a little research, and my books are an excellent place to help you look at the pictures and see for yourself what the evidence is.
www.nightfrightshow, folks. Marshall Klarfeld's our guest tonight. Click on his book covers. There are 4 of them. Order all 4. Why not? I mean, you know, summer's coming. You want to relax in the backyard with a beverage of your choice as Marshall picks up his cup of coffee. And this is a great way to get educated and inform yourself. I think it's a terrific idea. www.nightfrightshow.com. Marshall, what is inside you that keeps you pushing forward and questioning everything? Was this instilled in you at a young age, or is this just who you are?
Born that way. I mean, I just, as a kid, I can remember taking things apart and putting them back together because I wanted to see how they worked. And I didn't do it because I thought it was fun. I did it because I was driven to do it. And that's been the way it's been all my life. I was born wanting to know how things work, and it's one thing's led to another. Now in my senior years, I look at everything with a quizzical, you know, how's that work? How do they get put together? And you need to know, if you're going to find a core of your belief, be it the Bible or whatever religion you are, and you must have the prehistory of where we came from. How did we get created? Who created us? And what is the history behind the religion that brought us to the point where we have faith today? And maybe the next book I write, I will delve into what I believe was the origin of religion.
You know, that's always been a curiosity for me as well. And I'm wondering if the Anunnaki also didn't instill some sort of value system in us as well. You know, I go back, I think of Cyrus, for example, and he's credited with writing the first tablet of human rights. Now, folks, we're looking at, I think it was 25 or 3,500 years ago, so bear in mind there were still slaves in that, but it is still touted as the first idea for human rights. And that actual scroll sits in the foyer of the United Nations today in New York. What's your opinion? Do you think they instilled a sense of values on us?
Well, here's what I think. That's a good question, Brent.
Thank you.
Since we all share the same DNA, and I believe it's the Anunnaki's DNA, and I look at their history, you know, they write a lot about themselves. And there's 3 things I notice in their profile. A, they're warriors. They love to make war. B, they're oversexed. And C, they search for gold. And I said, well, what do we do as a species? We've inherited the traits of this advanced species that were our creators, and why not? Why wouldn't we follow? And it's not good. I mean, they weren't all benevolent. There were some pretty atrocious things that they did. And I questioned Sitchin. This is kind of interesting, and I'll share it with you. I think outside the box. And I said, Zechariah, the story that we got of the mutiny in the mines, and the reason that they wouldn't get the gold because their workers were tired of digging, and Enki said we could create a primitive worker, put our mark on him, create him in our image. I said, do you think they were spinning us? I said, they wrote the story. Victor's always right. And he said, Marshall, the record speaks for itself. He wouldn't go outside of what the translations were saying. And I, in my mind, said, well, maybe these guys just wanted a slave species and they had to have a cover story. So, who knows? They wrote it. We don't know whether that's true or not. And then the other thing I said, they were here for 200,000 years before we appeared, 400,000 years in the colonization. What do they do with all that gold? I said, that's more gold than they'd absolutely ever need to seal the oath. You think they were ingesting it, white powder gold? Marshall, the record speaks for itself. He wouldn't go outside anything other than what the database told him. And my mind said, what if, maybe they did this. And I do think that they had surpluses of gold that they didn't have a use for.
Another, somebody just texted me and asked me to ask you about a flat Earth theory. Is there any validity in that?
No, I've found no evidence of it. There's a hollow Earth theory, and there's portals, and there's vortexes, and
yes.
I mean, there's all manner of theories that have yet to be proven. I saw it the other day. NASA's got a warp drive engine they're working on. They can go faster than the speed of light, and they said it doesn't take any energy. And I said, whoa. There's lots of things we haven't discovered yet. There's technology that they didn't leave any of the tools that they used to put these stones together. We don't still know how the precision of cutting those and fitting them in masses of structures all over the planet. You keep looking and you find more pyramids. You keep looking, you find more stone circles in Syria, in Golan Heights, and in Peru. Mm-hmm. There are these sheepfolds. They're all over the place. And you wonder,
damn, there's the music. I'm so sorry. I was so engulfed with your conversation that I totally lost track of time. Folks, Marshall Klarfeld, www.nightfrightshow.com. It has been an absolute pleasure, my friend. Thank you so much. Thank you enough.
Enjoyed the conversation.
I'm Brent Holland from Night Fright. See you all next time. Bye now.
Listening to Night Fright and your host, Brent Holland. The time is now. Your voice in the dark for paranormal and conspiracy.
The JFK Assassination, the definitive book by Brent Holland. From inside the Oval Office to Daily Plaza, first-person witness accounts. Order yours right now, nightfrightshow.com.